Hey, it's Jay here. I'm down in my shop, and this is the introduction to a three-part video series on making what I'm calling my hardware store. My hardware store is a shop organization thing that I'm making based on some Adam Savage stuff and some other ideas I have on my own. It's going to be a big set of cabinets along the wall to hold all kinds of stuff. And by stuff, I've been in my shop 20 years, a little over, and every time I do a project here, you wind up with some stuff. You buy some screws, and you wind up with some leftovers. You buy some casters, they're the wrong size. You buy some more, you wind up with a set of casters, things like that. And even though this is set up as a wood shop, I don't exclusively use it for that, so I got all kinds of stuff. I got different materials, different things that I need to store. So this is my first shot into coming up with how to store all this stuff. And for years I've been kind of coming up with ways to store bits and pieces as things would pile up. But for the last couple years things have been piling up again. So I need to get a lot of that into one area and off of all my benches. So what I've been doing is I've been using these Plano 3700 series boxes for years and years and years, and these things are really nice. They're a good size. This one's full of screws. It's nice and thin. This one's full of plumbing fittings. It's a little thicker. It's got 4 dividers. This one's got 5. And there's dividers going, you can put dividers in going each way. They work out to be pretty nice things. I think I got ideas for a cabinet from Popular Woodworking back in the early 2000s, maybe Glenn Huey, and I used to have it hanging right back here. It's now hanging over in my annex. I am annexing a chunk of the shop for this project. I originally planned on putting it in the corner over in my shop, and then these things also. This is one where I put my Dalmax in, and I use some Kaizen foam. This is a no divider version. There's a bunch of different variants of these boxes. They're pretty nice. And then I started using the Sortimo kind of thing from Adam Savage, but not Sortimo. So these Stanley boxes. These are really nice because you can pull the bins out, take them with you where you want to go. So if I need some pocket hole screws, I just kind of pull out a bin full of pocket hole screws and take them with me. Don't need the whole thing, can't knock it off and knock them all over the place. They come in also a thicker version. But that's the next video. Part 2 is going to be me building the upper cabinets that hold these guys. This video is part 1 where I'm going to build for larger stuff. So I've been starting to use these kind of bins for larger stuff, and they're just stacked. They were just stacked around my shop before I got this thing built. Obviously I'm shooting this after I'm done the project, but acting like I haven't started it yet maybe, I don't know. But anyway, these bins, this one's full of electrical stuff. So I've got all kinds of boxes and chunks of electrical thing that just whatever around the house electrical stuff was laying around, went into this bin. These are nice Sterilite bins. They're 18-liter versions of a Sterilite bin. And I like these because they're very durable. Some of the other brands will crack if you sort of bash it into something and you're not being super careful with it. This one's very flexible, so when you hit something with it, it doesn't crack. So I like these 18-liter. They have the locking lids, and if I get everything in there right, lock right up, close. You can carry them around. They're completely airtight. Not completely airtight. No dust gets in them, I'll put it that way. They're not airtight, but they're at least, there's no major openings. They're not waterproof or anything like that. But they're really nice bins, and they're fairly cheap. I think less than 15 bucks, 12, something like that. There's also these SIDIO crates. These things are supposed to be like the old milk crates. They're much beefier, super strong. They're very squared off and not as rounded, so what's inside is easier to deal with. At one point I made some inserts for those Sterilite bins, and I had to sort of bandsaw cut the inserts and things like that so that I could put some dividers in there, and it was specifically for this stuff, which is my soldering stuff. So they have a real nice top with latches on it. These are not quite as air resistant. They have handles that come inside, so you can see my hand there, and so if you were actually running a router right next to it, it would shoot stuff into it. I kind of keep them away from that, especially something like my soldering stuff. But part of the whole idea is that these go in a hardware store area that's specific to that. So the whole basic design is going to be a large set of base cabinets that hold a bunch of these kind of bins, these two types. They can also hold up to a medium-size Festool Sustainer, which is very similar in size to this SIDIO crate. So, so the bin, I'll show you the design in my design book here in a minute for what I'm planning on doing. But it's going to be a base cabinet for these and some uppers for these, and then some extras here and there. I'm going to have some pull-out shelves, so when I pull a bin out I can set it on there, open it up, get what I need out of it, put it back, close the shelf, back up. So that's the plan, the basic plan. I'm going to show you what's in the book and then we'll get started. Now what I did was I drew up all the different kinds of bins that I use. So these are the Planos, Stanleys, and the Stanleys I have a bunch of different numbers in here for the maximum sizes and minimum sizes of different things. Then the Sterilite and SIDIO crates, very similar sized. And finally a Festool Sustainer in case I wanted to build something for that as well. And I decided that I was going to make a hardware wall, and this is my design for the base cabinet. The concept of this is it holds 2 Sterilite or SIDIO crates per opening here. It's all going to be made of plywood. This is a big cabinet. It looks a little tiny drawing, but big cabinet. And I designed it to minimize my use of plywood, which turned out to be a mistake, but we'll see that later in the video. For this video, we're just building the base cabinets. Subscribe if you want to see the upper cabinets, where I'm going to build enough to store a bunch of these, and also all the other stuff that goes along with it, and some other shop organization things will be intertwined in there. Thanks! My original plan was to replace this bench in this cabinet with the hardware store. So take a look as we go through the videos. Look around in the background. You'll see this bench just piled full of stuff. You'll see this lathe and that grinder in the background. I was constantly moving them around. There was stuff on every surface. The hardware store has done a really good job, and now a lot of that stuff is over in the shop annex and nice and organized. So to start the base cabinets, I'm going to cut up the plywood. For a bunch of years now I've been exclusively using Baltic birch plywood because it's so much nicer than this stuff. But thanks to Putin I can't get that locally anymore without buying in huge quantities. So this is potato chip plywood from a home center. I call it potato chip plywood because it just kind of turns into potato chip shapes when you cut it up. So I'm using my new table for the first time, my height adjustable MFT, and I'm checking my plans and going through and cutting up all the plywood. Now I'm going to look at the drawer slides that I got. They're locking drawer slides that I'm going to use for the shelves, the pull-out shelves. I decided to go with these slightly more expensive locking things, and they actually changed what I needed a little bit. They're a little bit longer because they have levers on the end than what they would have been if they were just regular stuff. So I'm sizing down the plywood, and I realize at this point that I'm really going to need to edge band it. As I look at the insides of the plywood, they have way more gaps than the outsides. There's a lot of voids and gaps in this plywood, and I think the edges would just crumble away after years of use. So once I get all the pieces sized down at the various saws, I'm going to start doing some edge banding. I have some old cherry laying around that's cut-offs from other projects, and the stuff, it just isn't that great. It's sort of the leftovers, the dregs of the cherry, but when I saw it up into little strips, I can make a lot of edge banding out of it, and I've been using it for that for a few years now. This project should use it all up. You can see I'm just sawing up these pieces of cherry, turning them into little strips. They're 3/4 by 3/4 inch strips, and I'm putting them on the edge, and I made them that thick just to add a little bit of extra thickness to these things for those levers on the drawer slides that I'm using. These are some pretty big cabinets, so every step I take is just out. It seems like hours and hours of doing one thing over and over again. This chunk is doing the edge banding for the front of every piece that I'll be using. You can see the pieces I cut were too long. I think they're full 4-foot pieces, and I'm not quite making it that tall. But anyway, once I got the edge banding on, I realize I need a way to smooth the edge banding to the edge of the plywood. If I tried to use a sander or a plane, all I got to do is just touch that plywood with its sub-micron thickness of outer layer, and it'll just get destroyed, and I'll just see usually you see some kind of purple glue underneath. So I'm making a router jig that will smooth the edge banding. If you paid enough attention, you realized I screwed up the first one and had to make a whole second one, but I didn't show that on here. I did it upside down on the table saw there where I was trying to make it. But here it is in action, and it's uses a planer blade on the router. I think that is what they call it, and it smooths down the edge banding, and I adjusted it so that it's barely a paper thickness above the edge, and that way when I do sand it, I can just use a low enough grit that I don't sand burn right through the outer layer of the plywood. This plywood was oddly decent as far as that went, but otherwise the inner layers might as well be balsa wood. You can kind of just like stick your fingernail through them. But here I am, I have a whole stack, and I'm going through and I am getting rid of the edge banding I made was 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch, and the plywood is thinner than that, so it was sticking out quite a bit on either side. So I just had to go through and do this, and it was another one of these operations that just went on and on and on, and the dust collection wasn't very good, so there were piles and piles of sawdust. But here I am using my table for my MFT for the first time in anger to cut down these wider pieces. These are too big to fit on my miter saw. They're that can only cut up to 12 inches, and these are something like 20, so it's the perfect solution here. And I'm cutting these up. I had to put a little extension on the edge of my bench here. I just used some spare 80/20 to make an extension, and on that extension I put a stop block that extended out so it held the thing better, and there was a stop block out there a little further than the fence that I can use, and you'll see me here just stick a piece of wood on that stop block I didn't make anything slick there that was folding or anything like that. I just made a piece of wood that I could put on and take off for these longer pieces. My plan for the future is to make something slick that'll do this a little better, but for now this thing just works great. I love this bench. It turned out better than I ever expected it to. As I finish up cutting all my plywood down to size and getting all my pieces together, I did some minor sanding on the edge banding to get it flat, and now it's time to do joinery. For joinery, I bought myself a domino for this project, and it arrived kinda just in time, so here I am doing a quick unboxing of my domino and the dominoes that I got. No ASMR for me ripping that stuff off at this fast motion. So I made some test cuts to prepare for the project. So I used one of those pieces I cut as a kind of jig. I marked the exact middle where I want to do all my joinery, and I put a little fence on here. Push it up against there like that, bring it in, make a mark where I want to do my center joint, and then I'll make marks over here to just show that I want to make end ones that are aligned with the now with this piece I want this side to go over here like so. So I want to reference my fence from here. Lay that down. I can make my mark here. Make my 2 marks for where I want to do that. I should be able to do the joinery right there, there. I've got it set on medium tight, and I'm going to do the center one at medium tight every time. So I'll go ahead and do that one real quick. Now I've got it on tight. Ooh, sweet. Very nice. Now that I'm figuring out this domino, I need to do everything about 50, 60 more times, and I will have my cabinet joinery all ready to go. This is one of these step and repeat processes in this cabinet that I just kind of have to keep cranking away at. This cabinet was way bigger and more complicated than I sort of had given it credit to in the first place. Easy for me to say. But as I go, I just get better and better at it. And by the end, I was cranking out these joints, and I had figured out a few better ways to hold the device, and I was getting way faster at it and making much better joinery. I got the thing assembled. Here it is. It's big. Not sure I have actually enough clamps to clamp this thing together for the size it is. And manipulating this thing is pretty awkward. Sometimes when you draw something and you do the design to minimize use of plywood, this minimizes use of plywood because all these dividers are separate pieces that are just offcuts that would be kind of wasted anyway. When I cut the main pieces, I had little 8-inch piece, less than 8-inch piece left over. Each of these things is 7.5 inches, so I was able to just take those out of little offcuts, and instead of using a whole nother chunk of plywood to build 2 more sides so I could push 2 cabinets together. But I think ultimately, long term, that's what I want, is 2 cabinets pushed together. Even with no glue, it's pretty solid. With the dominoes in there, I like it a lot, but it's just going to be too unwieldy to deal with. So I think I'm going to go ahead and make 2 more side pieces for the center, cut all the shelves in half, cut the bottom in half, put it all together, and then reassemble it. I'm going to have to make something to go along the top because I want the top to still be one piece. Sometimes you got to make it and then you figure it out. So at this point, I've gone ahead and gone through those same steps you watched me go through at the beginning, where I cut up a bunch of plywood, edge band it, sand it, cut it up, cut the edge banding down with the router, and go through. And now I'm doing final sanding on all the parts so that I can assemble the 2 cabinets now. And I'm going to go ahead and then head into glue up here. Here I am starting to glue in some dominoes. I started off gluing them into the sides, and then I'm going to put the shelves into each side and put the thing together. One of the things I learned when I was assembling the first version of this cabinet is these dominoes, when you're messing with this cheap plywood that's always warped and twisted in some direction or the other, these dominoes will align it in one direction. They won't align the other direction. So if this bottom piece is warped this way, you put this on here, it's still going to move around one way or the other, or leave gaps in the center or whatever it is. So I found that I was having to use dozens and dozens of clamps to try to put this big cabinet together with all the different moving pieces in there. So what I did is I drilled pocket holes in all these shelves. Now I'm doing the assembly on the one side. I'm gluing in each piece and shooting in the pocket hole screws that are going to hold it all together. The things I found on the first cabinet, that everything just aligns and comes out at 90 degrees, and I don't even have to worry about it when I shoot those pocket hole screws in. Everything I cut nice and square, just it all comes together nice and square. One of the issues I had when I put together the first cabinet, you can see the back goes in these slots right here. Slides in the back, internal to the back of this frame, and I can screw it into each of these shelves to give a little bit more strength to each shelf. So if I have a lot of weight in some of the bins, the shelf won't sag over time. The problem is the bottom I made completely wind up flush with the bottom here. So the back has to screw into the bottom from underneath. And the hassle with that is actually just getting it aligned. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the piece of plywood for the back, and so this time I'm going to go ahead and put a cleat in there, and then I'll take the cleat out once it's clamped in. One of the other problems I've had assembling these cabinets before when I've done this is if I put a domino in one of these slots, like that one, and I don't get that slot aligned, and I try to bang the domino in and it's not perfectly aligned, there's such a thin amount of material down in here on the bottom of the domino slot that it'll punch its way through. So I have to be careful about that, putting this back on especially. I'll go ahead and put this cleat in here, and it's stood up by the actual bottom of the actual back of the cabinet. I'll kind of push it down and throw a couple of pocket hole screws in there to hold it in place. It'll be nice and easy to get out when I'm done. Now that I got the one side done, I'm putting the other side on. Once I get this side on, I'll go ahead and start working on the bottom. Right now I just flipped it over so that I can shoot the pocket hole screws in and let gravity be my friend instead of my enemy. You can see on here where I put this cleat earlier, it's going to help the back line up. When I stick the back on there, I can clamp it on, get the whole cabinet square, and then I'll put screws into each. Then I'll put some screws in from the bottom to hold this one nice and tight up against the bottom. So I'm using these clamps to square up the cabinet with the back. The back is perfectly sized to fit in this slot, so when I pull it tight against the bottom, the two sides go parallel and everything winds up lining up. And then I go ahead and put some screws in. I'm not gluing the back on, because when I put a finish on, I'm going to take the back off and finish the interior, and then I'll come back and do the put the back on. So I'm rolling it over here where I did the finish already. I didn't show that on camera. I think I had some lost files for that. But here I am screwing it back together after final finish, and now I'm putting the legs on the bottom. I decided to use these sort of cheap, not cheap even, these European style cabinet legs. I found some heavy duty ones on Amazon that are meant for sort of greater than kitchen cabinet weights. I don't feel all that sturdy on the other cabinet, but I'm going to go ahead and try them out. If they don't work, I'll just use some leveling feet. So one thing I haven't done yet is build the pull-out shelves so that I can put bins on there when I'm working on stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and install these locker things. They're pretty nice. You push the lid down, it goes in and out. They didn't come with any hardware, so I'm kind of making it up as I go. But I'm going to push them all the way up against the back so that this thing's just sticking out a little. I can push it down. Pull the shelf that's in there out. So it's finally time to push the cabinet over to the annex. Now, getting these things level with those leveling legs with my wood floors down there that are kind of a little bit wonky took quite a bit to do. So I'm pretty happy with how this thing turned out. It's pretty good. It's still a little unstable. I'm not. It's not unstable. It's just not. Just rocks a little bit. I think it's those legs. I just don't think those are very great legs. Anyway, it's in place. I still need to build the shelves, the pull-out shelves. I'm going to put a little spray paint can holding shelf on this side. That's why it sticks out a bit. But for now, I'm just going to start loading it up and getting stuff out of the way. While I load this up, I want to thank you for watching. The second video in this series is going to be me building the upper cabinets for my smaller hardware containers. As this goes, I'm clearing a lot of space in the shop already. My junk bench is already going to be cleaner by 10 minutes from the time I finish loading this thing up. This was a great project, and I appreciate you watching. Thank you so much.